Welcome everyone to today's Green Energy Series webinar. This is the rescheduled event from March the 7th, and we will be recording today's webinar and posting it to our YouTube page. My name is Nicole, and I am program manager at Solar Oregon. And here at Solar Oregon, we have these Green Energy Series webinars once a month on different topics related to solar. We also provide workshops on solar and storage education so that you can make good and informed choices about solar and battery storage. A little bit more about us. We provide workshops like these. We also have solar tours and solar showcases, and we provide education for solarized campaigns throughout our state. And with that, we'll jump right into the agenda. So today, with the recent Oregon legislative session wrapping up, we're going to be talking about short session and different bills that impact solar. And we have a very special speaker here joining us, Angela Crowley-Cook of Oregon Solar and Storage Industries Association. Angela has worked at Oregon Solar Storage and Industry Association for several years and also has a background with policy and has been really instrumental in our state advocating for solar policy. And we're just very excited to have her here to share updates from this legislative session. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Angela. Thank you so much for being here today. And then we'll wrap up after Angela presents with a Q&A. Thanks, Angela.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having me today. I'm really happy that the legislative session is over and pleased to tell you all about how it went. So first of all, there's some context to this year's legislative session. We always call an election year the silly season when it comes to all things legislative. And this year was definitely extreme silliness because this year is a short session, which means that the session was only 5 weeks long. The governor is up for re-election in the fall, as well as all the every member of the Oregon House of Representatives and some senators. In addition, there was the transportation bill that the legislature passed last year in a special session was referred to the ballot by the Republican running for governor. And the Democrats wanted to move that ballot measure from the fall ballot to the May ballot. And that caused a lot of partisan strife throughout the entire session. And then you have some of the issues at the federal level trickle down to the state level. There were bills on immigration. There were bills on gun violence prevention. There were issues around the cost of living. And so, some of the bills that were put forward were done so for partisan reasons by both parties. And so it got silly for sure. And it ended up that the Republicans actually had a mini walkout with the Senate Republicans leaving for half of a day and not showing up to floor, and some House Republicans doing the same thing. But luckily, that was a short walkout and agreements were made and they were able to get through the session. So that's good. Unfortunately, this last item here, the budget, was a real strain on the entire session mainly because of changes at the federal level. This year was a budget cut year. And not only is that difficult to make decisions to cut money from state agencies and the programs they provide, but it also means that if you want to pass legislation, you can't have it cost anything. So no new programs, no additional funds spent on very much of anything. A small handful of bills got through that cost money, but other things did not. So that was a pretty big backdrop to this session. We can now talk about what OSEA focused on. So we had several priorities when it comes to rooftop solar this year. The first one being the solar consumer protection for residential solar. This passed, we were very excited. It passed unanimously in the House of Representatives, which is no small feat, and passed with bipartisan support in the Senate. This bill is really important, especially now, excuse me, with the federal tax credit going away. We want to make sure that all solar companies in Oregon are playing by the same set of rules, the fair rules, and making sure that bad actors aren't getting away with bad behavior. And so over the last year and a half, we had a work group with OSEA, some consumer protection organizations, and the Oregon Department of Justice, as Department of Energy, as well as other state agencies, to come up with the best way to protect consumers when it comes to rooftop solar. And so what we came up with was a new disclosure form. That disclosure form will help the customer be able to match up everything that the salesperson told them with what is actually in the contract. And so if the salesperson told you free solar, then the contract says it's not so free. That disclosure form is kind of that step in the middle to make sure that people understand what they're signing up for. And one really important piece of that disclosure form that I want to talk about is that now all fees will be disclosed. And this is important because there is a federal dispute about whether or not something called lender fees can be disclosed. So this is the thing I'll compare it to is when you get a mortgage, you can add points to your mortgage and have a smaller payment. But those are fees that you pay to the lender. And so mortgage points or mortgage lender fees are very tightly controlled at the federal level. However, other types of loans are not as regulated in the same way. So auto loans, home repair loans, loans for solar, there's a dispute at the federal level about whether those lender fees can be disclosed, or whether they cannot be disclosed. Do people have the option to disclose those fees or not? So while that federal litigation is going forward, we borrowed what Washington State did. They require the solar installer to disclose any lender fees, taking that responsibility away from the lender because that's the part that's still disputed. This is important because over the last couple of years, we've heard about when lender fees are not disclosed, the owner ends up with a much higher fees and interest on their loan than they understood they would be responsible for. So we're very happy about that residential solar consumer protection bill, and especially now that we'll have all fees required to be disclosed. So this bill will take place or will take effect 91 days after the end of the legislative session. So in about 3 months, we'll have a new disclosure form in effect. And let's see, I see something in the Q&A. Oh, but maybe not. We'll let Nicole, just let me know if there's questions that come up.
Sounds good. And
Okay,
feel free to put any questions in the Q&A box as we're presenting.
great. And I'll try and keep an eye on that. Okay, so next, the solar and storage rebate funds are going to be released. So folks may know about and have taken advantage of the Oregon Department of Energy Solar and Storage Rebate Program. And for the last several years, we haven't had any new funding for rebates. However, this fall we learned that the program still has some unspent funds. Those are likely from projects that missed deadlines and just weren't able to expend their entire rebate. And so about $1.5 million was left in the ODO kind of account for these rebate funds. And the legislature needed to allow the department to continue to use those. And so that allowance is called an expenditure limitation that was included in the omnibus budget bill and passed out of the legislature. So we're very excited to have that $1.5 million for rebates. But before they get released, there will be some rulemaking that will happen at the Oregon Department of Energy because in 2025 there was a bill that allowed storage to be added to existing solar systems. Previously, the rule was that you had to purchase the solar and the storage together in order to qualify for the rebate. But with this new change, you can purchase storage and get a rebate for that after you've installed your solar. And so there will be a short rulemaking that's happening right now. We hope that that will wrap up in time for funds to be released in April or May. So we're very excited about that. Unfortunately, a couple of our priorities did not pass. Virtual power plants is the biggest one. For those of you who haven't heard of community-based power or virtual power plants before, that's the concept that customers can bring their own devices, solar and storage, but also smart thermostats, electric vehicles, and electric vehicle chargers, kind of to the utilities. And the utilities would be able to use those devices when there's times of peak need, if it's really hot, really cold, or some other type of grid event. PGE and PacifiCorp already have bits and pieces of virtual power plants. They both have battery storage programs with incentives. They have various versions of peak time rebates and smart thermostat programs. But because the utilities are kind of in control of those programs, and there's no real financial reason for them to invest more in them because it doesn't help them earn their rate of return. They're kind of going at a slow pace, and we'd like to see greater adoption, especially of the battery storage programs. And so, one way that we've seen in other states that they have greater adoption is by having third-party aggregators participate in the program. So a third-party aggregator would be a company, let's just pick on Tesla, because they have electric vehicles, charging stations, solar systems, and battery storage. So they already have the software they need to help, turn on and off these devices. And so how it would work is that Tesla would register as an aggregator, and then they would work with utilities during those peak events to make sure the utilities are getting the power or reducing the power as needed. And the utilities are not a fan of these third-party aggregators because it's essentially competition for them. So the bill ran into some snags. The Public Utility Commission um, was concerned about staff capacity to be able to do this and how much it would cost. Again, going back to those budget concerns I talked about on the slide before. So it didn't pass this year, but that gives us almost a whole year to think about how to bring forward a better bill next year. Colorado has a virtual power plant program, and they operate in a similar way to Oregon. And so we're going to spend the interim taking a look at Colorado and seeing what lessons we can learn so that we can bring a really great bill back next year. I should mention too, I can't remember if I mentioned this, but when you sign up for a virtual power plant, it's voluntary to do so, and you work with the utility on what parameters they'll set around, for example, drawing power out of your battery to make sure that you have some left when you need it and those types of things. So virtual power plants, it did have a really big coalition supporting it of environmental groups. The League of Cities support it. We had really strong support. So I think we will have a good chance when we come back next year. And I'll pause to answer a question. No, the rebate program will not allow for retroactive claims from previous years. It will only be for reservations for new systems going forward when they reopen the program. Good question.
And Angela, I had a question too. Do we know when those rebates will be available and released?
So yeah, hopefully April or May. That's their timeline. Um, April seems maybe a little optimistic, so it will most likely be May. And then there's one other bill that did not pass. This was not an OSEA priority, but something we watch very closely, which is balcony solar, which I'm sure folks have heard of. Balcony solar is the idea that you can have a solar panel not on your roof, but on a balcony or maybe on your back patio or something. And it's a very small system, so it would only power things at your, it would only work to reduce your energy consumption and power things in your home or apartment. The bill did not pass, and that's because it ran into some technical issues. So balcony solar, while it's really widespread in Germany and other countries in Europe, they have a very different electrical grid. And so we'll need to have different regulations and certifications when balcony solar comes to the US. So right now, the pieces and parts of a balcony solar system might be certified, but the entire balcony solar system altogether is not yet UL certified. And so passing legislation was a little preemptive. There's still some other states that are looking to pass a bill this year. So I think we're going to kind of wait and see how those other states handle it. So right now, to answer your question, the only state that has balcony solar legislation is Utah. And our legislation was modeled after theirs, but like I mentioned, there are a lot of other states looking to pass something similar. OSEA is in general excited about the idea of balcony solar, but we have a lot of safety concerns that we hope will be addressed by that UL certification and the National Electrical Code when it gets updated. So I think we are okay to have it wait another session and hope that the certification that we need happens in this next year. So we'll have more confidence in what we're working on there.
Angela, we had another question about the rebate program and what amount available is there for the solar and storage rebate program?
Yeah, so the total amount will be about $1.5 million. And what that means per project will differ depending on the type of project. So if you're a PGE and PacifiCorp customer and you already get a rebate from the Energy Trust of Oregon, your rebate amount will be lower than rebates available to people that don't have access to Energy Trust incentives. So people in co-ops, people in municipal electrical companies that don't have existing incentives. You also get a higher incentive if you are low or moderate income. And so the actual amount depends on the project, but they all cap out. It can't be more than $5,000 for solar and $2,500 for storage. But most of the rebates are much lower than that, maybe like around between $1,000 and $2,000. And yes, to answer Brett's question, it is the rates are not changing from what they were previously. Was there another question that I missed there? Okay, I don't think so.
Think you answered them. Someone also shared that Virginia is close to passing balcony solar. Um, yeah, so I think we've got them. I'll keep an eye for future questions.
Great. And then lastly, no bad bills passed. So that is very good. Um, the more popular solar gets, the more attention it has, and the opponents of solar have things to say about it. So luckily nothing this year, but we expect there will be some more bills coming next year that we'll have to watch out for. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. So I know that our focus here is on rooftop solar, but it's also worth mentioning some utility scale solar wins in this session. When I say utility scale solar, I mean a solar project that looks like what you see in the picture there. It's not meant for a home or business to offset their energy use. It's like a power plant and it's sold directly to the grid. And so there were two good bills that passed in this last session. Well, both of them are really intended to help solar take advantage of the tax credits that are expiring. So while the residential solar tax credit ended last year, utility scale tax credits have a few more years, but there were new deadlines thrown up there. And so this first bill is a temporary siting streamlining bill. And so for projects that normally would have to be sited at the state level at what's called the Energy Facility Siting Council, or FSEC, this bill allows them to be cited at the county level instead of the state level. The county permitting is faster and it costs less. And so that will really help projects take advantage of the tax credits before those new deadlines hit. It's only temporary though. As soon as the tax credits expire, which is 2030, this provision will no longer be able to be used. The next bill, surplus interconnection, is something that will really help us use the grid more efficiently. So let's take an example of a wind project that connects to the grid, and let's pretend it's 50 megawatts. So they must have an interconnection agreement for 50 megawatts. An interconnection basically means hooking that renewable project up to the grid. That's the point of interconnection. And they are allowed to send 50 megawatts of wind power through that interconnection point. Well, the wind doesn't blow all the time. And here in Oregon, it mostly blows at night. And so the idea is that during the day, you have that surplus interconnection of 50 megawatts that's not being used. And so a lot of companies would like to add some solar to that point of interconnection, use 50 megawatts during the day for solar, 50 megawatts at night for wind. And we're kind of at a new place of coming up with rules around surplus interconnection. So this bill was the first attempt to put some rules in place. We didn't get it quite right, but we got it somewhat right. It was a good first step. We will have to come back next year and make some fixes. The current bill that will become law soon is only for existing projects, and we'd like to include new projects into that as well to make sure it's a competitive process. So that's a small technical fix bill that will probably come back next year.
Angela, we have another question about the rebate, and specifically for battery storage. Are there rules on the brand of battery that qualifies the first part? And then does the battery have to be controllable by the utility to get the rebate?
Good questions. So for the solar and storage rebate program that the state runs, there are rules about the type of batteries. I wouldn't say it's not necessarily brand specific, but the battery has to provide a certain amount of storage per the amount of solar that you have installed. Energy Trust of Oregon does have also has rules around batteries. Again, it's not necessarily brand specific, but making sure that customers are getting a quality battery. So for the Energy Trust incentive in the rebate program, the battery does not need to be controllable by the utility. However, if you'd like to participate in PacifiCorp or PGE's battery incentive program, then yes, that the battery does need to be controllable by the utility, of course, within the parameters that you agree to. So it's highly recommended to enroll your battery in one of those utility programs because if you think about it, most of the time you're not using that battery and you can get paid by the utility to let them use it when they need it. So I highly recommend if you have a battery or you're thinking about it to take a look at PGE and PacifiCorp's battery incentive programs. Okay, I think we can move to the next slide. This is an important one. How can you help? You can see this picture is taken in Bend. We met with Governor Brown at the time. It's really important to get to know your legislators. So every House of Representatives and state senator, they all have community meetings. Constituent coffees are kind of what they're called, or town halls. And the most important way that you can make sure that solar stays in their mind as something important to their voters is by attending those constituent coffee meetings and talking about solar and why you think solar is important, how you'd like the legislature to keep supporting it. We'd love to come back next session and ask for more money for the rebate program. But if they're not hearing about it from their constituents, it's not as big of a priority as all the other budget needs. So if you want to find out if you don't know who your legislator is, you can find out by going to OregonLegislature.gov, and there's a Find Your Legislator there on the home page. You can sign up for their newsletters, and they will tell you when they have constituent coffees. So please attend those. Make friends with your legislators. Oregon's a small state. If you come to more than one event, they will remember you. So please help us out, help the solar industry out and your fellow solar customers by befriending your legislators. And then lastly, stay engaged. Read your Solar Oregon newsletter. Reply to action alerts when they ask you to take action. It's really important that customer voices are heard because there's a lot of competing priorities for funding in Oregon and for legislative attention in Oregon, and they need to hear from people. So stay engaged is the number one way you can help there. And I see Linda has a question. Um, yeah, bad bills and legislation. So these come in any number of forms. I'll give you an interesting one from last year, 2025. Silly season sometimes goes into the previous year as well. Sometimes it's always silly season. And so I mentioned that there's a Republican running for governor against Governor Kotek if he is the primary winner, Representative Deal. He is the one who spearheaded that move to put the transportation package on the ballot. Last year, he put forward a bill about regulating solar and electric vehicles for child labor practices. Now, having, OSEA and all the solar, SEIA, our national group, we feel very strongly about child labor, and we don't want to see that to be a part of solar or battery systems. And that is something that's handled at the federal level. There are the Customs and Border Protection they have a whole protocol around trying to make sure that things are not produced by child labor. So we feel best handled at the federal level, is already being handled in a number of ways. And if you want to talk about child labor, why are you singling out solar and electric vehicles? When it's something that's targeting one or two things, that's really a red flag that this is not actually about the policy. It's more about making a political statement about solar and electric vehicles. Unfortunately, child labor pops up in a lot of the products that we use, cell phones, agriculture, all sorts of things. But again, that's best addressed at the federal level. Um, so that's one example of something that was like a bad bill targeted at solar and electric vehicles in particular. We were able to work with the representative. We had him change that into a study first to see kind of, is this something that needs further action? And then because that study had a price tag, it ended up not passing. And then, of course, he's not running for the legislature again since he's running for governor. But your next part of your question, Linda, is about net metering. Folks may recall a few years ago, PGE put forward a proposal that would essentially end net metering for customers that aren't able to afford battery storage. The good news is they've dropped that proposal, which is excellent. They've also created a brand new, really nice net metering website at PGE. So it feels like they've um, they had a little bit of changing their minds on that. However, that's not going to be the end of it. We know from what's happening across the country that there's still going to be a push to get rid of net metering and change it to something called net billing, which is not as great for solar customers. So, in a different regulatory proposal at the Public Utility Commission, um, this is where it gets a little wonky, but some folks may remember the feed-in tariff that was passed 15 years ago. Well, that's ending this year, or started to be ended last year, actually. And the utilities put forward proposals about what should happen with those customers. PacifiCorp recommended that they go on net billing instead of net metering. And PGE actually said, you know what, let's just put them on net metering. So, in that discussion between kind of net billing and net metering that was focused on just this particular program, but obviously would have wider impacts, the Public Utility Commission said, we're not going to open the net metering question right now, but we recommend that if it doesn't get opened by a utility petitioning to make a change, that the commission take a look at it in 2028. So we have a little bit of breathing room on net metering. And I would say that the Public Utility Commission is so overwhelmed and backed up with other things that they're required to do. We'll see how they feel in 2028 if they want to take on, you know, something that they don't have to, if they haven't been asked. They don't really have a lot of extra capacity. So I think we're safe for another few years. Yeah, let me talk about what net billing means. So, folks may have heard about what happened in California, that like net metering 3.0, and that was a move to net billing. So, net billing means that when you're home and the sun is shining and you're running your dishwasher, you get the full value of that solar at the time you're using it. So let's see, I think PGE right now, I think electricity is at maybe 20 cents a kilowatt. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And so they're saying, okay, when you're using your own solar to wash your dishes, you get the value of that solar at the full 20 cents. However, if you're not home and your solar is just generating energy and you're not using it, you're sending it across the street to your neighbor, we're not going to credit you that 20 cents. We're going to credit you something way less, maybe even as low as 5 cents for that power. And that doesn't seem fair to the customer, and it seems like a real giveaway to the utility. Um, where I'm sitting right here, I'm at my desk at home. I look across the street. My neighbor has solar panels. I don't because I need a new roof in the next couple of years, so I'm not quite ready. When they're not home and not using their solar, I'm using it. The wires connect our houses directly. And so, it doesn't seem fair that the utility should get such a steal for that power when my neighbor paid a lot of money to install that. And so we are going to work hard to keep net metering and not reduce it to that net billing. Hopefully that makes sense. And yes, Joe, agree that net billing is only good for shareholders. Um, I hope that time of use is, continues to be in a way that's rolled out that works for solar. We want to be careful with time of use to make sure that it's not set up in a way to disincentivize solar. So for example, I'm on PGE's time of use and the peak hours are 5 to 9 p.m. We want to make sure that actually lines up with their peak time because, there's a good chunk of the year when solar is producing until 9 p.m. But, there's some times of the year where it isn't. So time of use is definitely a good thing. We just want to make sure that the utilities are being honest with their data about when those peak hours actually are. Well, I think that is it for me. And yes, Linda, definitely solar with time of use. It is a little tricky. If you have battery storage, that can make it a lot more valuable, so that you can kind of use your energy from your battery when the peak time is. Solar, I think it will save you money some parts of the year, and then other parts of the year it might cost you a little bit more. Mm. That's a great question about annual credits. Washington State lets customers roll over their annual credits. Why not Oregon? That's a great question. I think that would be smart. However, at the moment, if we kind of look around to other states, we want to keep that annual credit true up because some places have moved. And even here in Oregon, EWEB, Eugene Water and Electric Board, has moved to monthly true ups. So at this point, we're happy with annual true ups and we want to keep it that way and not move to anything smaller.
Thank you, Angela, for this update. I feel like it's really valuable just to see what's going on with solar during legislative session and what also might impact the next legislative session. Um, I'm hearing a lot of thank yous in the chat, so thank you for the work that you do. And yeah, I think OSEA also has some great events that happen, such as a monthly solar drinks, green drinks event. And you have a conference coming up, right, Angela?
We do, yeah. The conference is definitely more geared toward industry folks, but there's some really good policy sessions. And so if you love that policy, legislative and regulatory and permitting conversations, then you should definitely come. It's the last week of April, April 28th through 30th. And maybe I can post that link in the chat. And then, yeah, like Nicole mentioned, we do have our monthly networking that is at the Lucky Lab in Northwest Portland. There are many Lucky Labs, so it's you have to go to the one. Um, let's see. Okay, here's the link for our conference. This year it's going to be regional with Oregon and Washington, which is really great. And then I'm also going to post in the chat the link for our upcoming, we call that power drinks at the Lucky Lab. So here's that link. And all are welcome to our networking hour. Just show up. There's no cost. It's just a good time to hang out.
Thank you, Angela. And like Angela said, you can always check out our newsletter. We post events in there. So you can find your next solar events in the newsletter or on our event page. This will be posted to YouTube shortly, so you can revisit it or share it out with folks. And thank you again, Angela, for your time.